Hello, guys. Let's start talking about the blockchain terms which people generally use in the conversation, online article, or the news. Okay, so the first term is itself blockchain. So, what is it exactly, blockchain? So, let's try to create our own definition rather than understanding the existing definition, right? So, first thing is that it's a decentralized database which stores information in form of the transactions, right? It's just you can broadly see it as a database. People also call it a ledger. It can be public or private, right? Means it can be a public ledger or it can be a private ledger. When you talk about the public and private, there are two completely different things, and based on the permission set, it can actually differ a lot when implementing the solutions about the private and the public blockchain. So the next is that it is stored data in an immutable format. When we talk about the database, there has to be some data which is being stored in that database. So that data which we are storing in the blockchain is generally immutable. Why it is immutable and how it is immutable, it actually depends on the what are the implementations. So immutable means that data can be easily detected if it has been tampered by anyone first, and then second is that it is highly difficult to tamper the data due to decentralized network, because since everybody has the copy of the entire ledger, then it is very difficult for a malicious computer, even if he's the part of the entire network, to tamper a record and force everyone in the network to keep the tampered record. So in this sense, it becomes immutable because it is highly difficult to tamper the data, and it is very easy to identify if there is a tampering happen. Next is it is highly secure. Again, when we talk about the decentralization, the decentralized technology is always more secure than a centralized technology which is vulnerable to attacks, because everything is stored on a single centralized server. Next is that data gets stored by consensus based algorithms. So since there are miners, there are multiple machines running everything together on a network, then everything is recorded based on the consensus algorithm. We'll talk about the consensus algorithm in a separate lecture. Then we know that blockchain also uses a cryptography and generally exists over the peer-to-peer network. We'll talk about cryptography and peer-to-peer network as well in the upcoming terms. So here's our definition. So blockchain is a consensus-based, secure, decentralized public database which stores information immutably over peer-to-peer network. It's very simple. Okay, so next is the Bitcoin. So the question is like, what exactly Bitcoin is? So Bitcoin is one of the implementation of the blockchain technology. Remember, Bitcoin is not blockchain. Blockchain is the foundational technology which on top of which everything runs. So for example, internet is not Google, internet is not Facebook, or Facebook is not internet. So Facebook is one of the implementation of the internet. Similarly, Bitcoin is one of the implementation of the uh, blockchain technology. Other implementation of the blockchain technology might be smart contracts, Ethereum, Zcash, and other or virtual currency. There are tons of virtual currency available. So Bitcoin, what is exactly Bitcoin? So it's one of the largest cryptocurrency exists right now. Bitcoins remove the dependency on the trusted third party to execute a transaction or remit the money from one place to another place. Right? It can even done the cross-border transaction instantly. The transaction gets executed by peers based on the consensus-based algorithm and recorded by in the blocks by the miners. So miners are responsible for mining and storing the information. We'll talk about mining and what are the miners in the next slides. So Bitcoin also allows you to execute a transaction without trusting the receiving party within fraction of seconds. That's another beauty of Bitcoin that can happen. Next is yes, the even the cross-border transaction can be executed in seconds. So that's the idea of Bitcoin. That's why the Bitcoin is used to transfer money from one place to another place without worrying about the intermediate process and trust and third parties. So the Bitcoin is a decentralized virtual cryptocurrency built on top of blockchain. Okay, so let's talk about the mining first. Okay, so you know that mining is a process of finding the bitcoins or the virtual currency. So there are actually many ways to get the virtual currency from the market. Simplest way is to buy you using the fiat currency, the government currency. So you pay the dollars and you get the virtual coins in your pocket. That's simple. Right. Another way is to earn it through the mining by investing computational power into it. So you will be actually connecting your computer to the internet, and then that internet will actually do something in your machines, that it will actually consume the CPU cycles, the computation by the CPU. It will also consume some RAMs, but majorly it depends on the whether they are consuming RAM or the CPU. It depends on the type of the blockchain. So they are actually, or the miners are actually asked to solve a very complex computational problem to identify that next block in the blockchain. So the job of the miner is, or you can say the in the process of mining, the miners actually add a block to the blockchain and announce it to everyone in the network, right? By actually doing some computational, mathematical process. In return of doing this computation, they are rewarded with some virtual coins like bitcoins, ethereum, etc. So it depends on the which blockchain you are actually mining. So miners uses a CPU power to identify a nonce, a number, right, through which they can create the digest or the signature of the next block. So ultimately the idea is to identify the new block in such a way that the signature of the new block is less than the most recent block. So that's the idea of mining. And it's not that easy, as it sounds, because to identify what should be that nonce, what should be that random number, so that the next block signature becomes lesser than the previous block. It's a very complex problem. And CPU take millions and billions, or not even millions, thousands, hundreds of billions CPU cycle to actually identify that, or hundreds of billions time they have to calculate or guess on an average to identify what is the right block. So the chances of getting a block is difficult, and it's very complex. So mining is the process of recording the transaction as a block into the blockchain for that currency, and actually getting some money or virtual currency. So miners are just a computer which is mining the blockchain. So miner is responsible for inserting the transaction into the blockchain and sign it with its own public or private key. Miners also receive the reward or the Bitcoin or for from the blockchain for adding a block. So in Bitcoin it is 25 BTC currently, and in Ethereum it is 10 Ether per block. So next is the Genesis block. So Genesis is block is nothing but the very first block into the blockchain. So if we talk about the blockchain, there must be some block zero, right? Or the block one. So that first block is called Genesis block. Modern version of Bitcoin actually assigned it block number zero, though older version gave it number one. So it varies and depends on the implementation of the blockchain. The Genesis block is always almost hard coded into the software, right? It is actually mentioned either in some settings or some file or some memory, or kept there in some software code. It is not just a memory or an added block, it's just a first block which has been initialized, not mined. So the block may also contain a pre-mined coins if needed for some other information, with some other information. So you can have some pre-mined coins, because some blockchain experts do that so that they can earn some money at the later stage. So that's all for this lecture. We'll continue understanding other terms in part 2. Thank you.